From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. While certainly famous for rousingly crowd-pleasing scores to any number of Disney and Marvel films among the major studio franchises he's trekked in over 160 soundtracks from Up to Lost, no subject that Michael Giacchino has tackled before is as adult or searingly intimate as Society of Snow. While the tale of a Uruguayan soccer team trapped by a plane crash in the Andes has been seen on screen before, this harrowing odyssey of survival has never been more realistic given the uncompromising vision of filmmaker J.A. Bayona, who'd helmed the tsunami survival tale The Impossible before teaming with Michael Giacchino for Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. From Latin American guitar to expressionistic passages that could be at home in the Planet of the Apes Forbidden Zone, Giacchino most importantly captures the faith that takes these survivors through unimaginable lengths to reach civilization, expertly conveying both the punishingly beautiful environment and the emotional limits of human experience in coming out alive. Giacchino's score captivates with every snow-trudging step through the mountains to solemnly moving deliverance, with the score that's deservedly on the Oscar shortlist for this acclaimed film. And now here's a composer who knows something about showing how we can musically survive forbidden environments. Welcome, Michael Giacchino.
Hi, how you doing?
It's great having you here, Michael. So your friendship with J.A. began long before this film. How did you first meet, and how did it all lead to Society of Snow?
Well, I met him around, I would say, almost 14 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. But it was in Spain at a film music festival in Ubeda. And we were at dinner, and my wife, or my now wife, was sitting between he and I. I had never met him before. I didn't even know who he was. And she looked over and saw on his wrist that he was wearing a Superman watch. So she said to me, she goes, "Hey, you should talk to this guy." And I was like, well, it was late. I was tired. And she's like, "He's got a Superman watch on. You might like that." And I was like, "He's got a Superman watch?" I was like, "Okay." So I introduced myself, and we ended up, we were up that night till like 4 a.m. talking about Richard Donner and Superman and all of our favorite movies and soundtracks. And, J.A. is a huge, huge soundtrack nerd. He has everything. He collects everything. So he was there just as a fan to be there and see all the stuff. He was also there with a composer that he was working with at the time. And we just sort of, we just hit it off, and we stayed in touch since then. And anytime we were in each other's time zones, we'd hang out. We would, talk about, he would bring me films to look at that he was working on just for my thoughts and comments. I wasn't scoring them, but he would be, anytime he'd come to LA with his newest film, he would find a time for he and I to sit down and watch it together, and I could just give him my thoughts. And then, of course, Jurassic World came around, and he gave me a call and said, "Hey, they asked me to direct Jurassic World. What do you think?" I was like, "I think you should do it. Then we can work together. It'll be fun." So that was sort of, the short answer to a long relationship, but that's how it happened.
Wow. So this kind of brings us to our first question from Petri. Obviously this is the third time the story has been told, and I don't think ever better. But I think all the films are going to have kind of elements that musically transfer to each other. So did you ever take into consideration what James did on the first Hollywood version? The first one was this horrific movie called Survive, but Live is a pretty good movie and a very good score. Did you take any of that into consideration, or just kind of put it out of your mind when you approached your own version of this?
Yeah, I just went into, it's not like you're doing a new version of Star Wars, or where you need to sort of carry things over. This was a completely different vision of what this story was. So I didn't watch the film. I didn't listen to to James's music, and yes, James is legendary and I love him. But the assignment for me was to get into the mind of this particular movie, this particular story, and in this particular director's vision for what it should be. So no, I sort of just went in completely clean.
Wow. The one thing is that, it starts off with kind of a sense of isolation and
Yeah.
sadness. And one thing I absolutely loved about this score, which to me should have easily been in the top 5 nominees, is this a sense of religiosity to it.
Yeah.
But how do you want to develop, again, from sadness, from hopelessness, to a sense of we've got to get out of here?
You always, I think in any film you're working on, the goal for me anyway is to I want to be in the head of the character that we're following in the story, and I want to always be in the sense, I want to feel what they're feeling so that I can give that to the audience as well. Music can instantly put you in a state, and it's sort of dangerous in films because it can lead you in the wrong direction. So it's a very tenuous tightrope you walk when you're doing it, especially on a film like this. Usually, as I said, I like to be in the head of the main character. I like to be in their space. I want you to feel what they're feeling. And that's one thing if you're talking about working on Star Trek or Spider-Man or you name it, Ratatouille, Up, whatever. These are sort of made up stories. This was very different because I was being trusted with the stories of many people who are still with us today, and also many people who are not with us today because of the event. So I was always just trying to be thoughtful about what I was writing. Every single note needed to feel truthful in a way that just felt more important than when I'm doing it on any other kind of film that is more fiction based. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was, you don't want to, and you don't want to overstep those bounds either. So when we first talked about it, I watched the movie and I said, this is what this score sounds like this to me. And I reached inside the piano and I just grabbed a couple of strings and just plucked them like that. And it was this horrifying, just kang kind of a sound. And I said, that's to me what it would have felt like to be there, at least in the first day or so, just this place of bleakness and just barren, like it's not yet melodramatic or sad. It's just, where the hell are we is the feeling, and how are we going to get out of this thing? The reality of how hard it was going to be hadn't yet set in. Because they assumed and hoped that in a day or so there'll be a plane coming over and to find them, and that would be it. But as we all know, that's not what happened. Now, as you said, the film right off the bat starts off with this cue that is sort of a sadder, melancholy cue. It's and it occurs over a picture of everyone right before the flight. They're standing in front of the airplane, and the reason for that was because this is a story we know. You go into this movie knowing what you're going to see and what's going to happen. You just don't know how it's going to all unfold. So it was a way of sort of getting in at a point of emotion that felt like, yes, they're going. These people going off on this incredible, hopefully to have an incredible weekend, but of course turned into a months-long ordeal. No, none of us would ever want to have to suffer through.
Wow. One thing I really love about the score is how you convey your gray nationality of the characters, and also where they are in the Andes, which brings us to our second question is, what libraries do you use for unique and ethnic instruments, or was it something done uniquely for this film?
There were no libraries used. This is all, live recordings. I really don't do, I only will use libraries and samples if I'm doing mock-ups. Otherwise, it's live players. And there are some synth elements that I created for different sounds, but that's more of a unique thing, a unique instrument. So the libraries were percussionists, actually, who were using instruments that were sort of indigenous to that area of Uruguay and the Andes. And even the choir that I used was singing in a language called Mapuche, which is an indigenous language of the Andes region. And so for me, it just felt important to have that as a backbone to the entire story. This is their story, and I felt like all of the sounds that came out of it needed to feel in some way as a mix between this alien space they found themselves in and home as well. So that's where all those came from. But yes, all of those, all the percussion and stuff was real people.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the score reminded me of like Planet of the Apes scores, because
it's very funny that you say that, because when I first started talking to JA about this, one of the things I said was, do you remember that in the original Planet of the Apes, when the astronauts landed on that place, it wasn't playing sadness, it's not playing oh woe is me, it's not playing overly dramatic, it's playing what's around them, which is mystery and the unknown. And that's what I wanted to be in this very uncomfortable, bleak spot that they found themselves in. So I was trying as best I could to do that musically so that the audience could be right there with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful, unsparing film, and the music is used very impactfully and very succinctly. I mean, I guess for any composer who has to handle really difficult subjects like this, I think for this once was enough for me, as good as this film is. But how do you retain your mental health working on this?
It's hard. It's because you and I have a very sort of scheduled way of working. I like to come in around 8:30 or 9, and I I work till 5:30, and then that's it. So when I would leave at the end of the day, after spending so much time in the mindset of these characters and these people, it definitely followed me around. It followed me around. I would come in the house at night, and my wife would be like, "Are you upset with me? Are you mad?" I'm like, no, I'm still living in this kind of space. And I would have to flip over in some ways. One of the ways I actually used to flip over was I would watch an episode of The Love Boat. I'd be like, okay, let's just change channels here for a moment and let's watch this. But yes, it is something that, because of the way I like to do things, because I like to sort of feel what it is that these characters are feeling in order to write the music that helps me stay truthful to the story, then you live in that space longer than you'd like. And but it's it's part of the job. And quite honestly, any discomfort I felt during the time I was working on this was nothing compared to what they had to go through in real life. So in any sense of the sort of word is I still had it easy.
I don't think Captain Stubing would have made it out of this movie.
No, I don't think so either, to be honest.
For me, one of the best cues I heard last year is the whole climactic cue in this film, where the religious qualities really come into the fore of the score. Where you see them, back together, and it tracks right through the rescue. Tell me about writing that. I mean.
Yeah, well, that was, I like to write things in order. Generally, I would like to start at the beginning of a story and work my way through the end. And I feel like that way I can properly build the storytelling in the right way. So when I got to that scene, it was a huge sort of cathartic release for me after spending all this time leading up to that. I finally felt like, oh, now I can just let it all out and let it just pour over the rest of the story here till the end credits. And that was actually a really emotional, moment, more so than in really any other film I've ever worked on. And I kept finding all of these surprising things happening as I was writing this film because of how real it was. And since the film finished, I was actually able to meet several of the survivors too, which was incredible. And you go in thinking, oh, I'm going to meet these people that had this horrible experience. But what I learned was they carried this incredible joy with them, and this positivity and this outlook on life that you would, of course, only get by going through an experience like that. But that's not what you expected to sort of get out of meeting them. So that really surprised me, and it helped me actually in my coming back out of this really tough spot that you stick yourself in emotionally for a while. It's a bit like actors, when they have to embody these things. I feel like composers, at least for me, I end up doing the same thing.
Wow. Now you have such a monumental body of work in so many genres. We've got some questions about them. One from
All right.
Bruce.
Bring them.
I enjoyed your work on the Batman, and I love the premiere of the Batman live at the Dolby Theater. Did you attend the event, and were there any of the cues adapted from original compositions to fit the orchestra's live performance?
I was not there that night. I forget, there was some weird work thing I had to do, but it was, but I know people who went and had a great time. And then when we do those films, we try to make it as honest and truthful to the original as possible. So everything you heard that night was us trying to make it feel like the movie, because, when you're going to see something like that, yes, you're going to see the orchestra, but you're also going to see the movie. So you want to experience that movie as close as you can to the original, which is not always easy, because a lot of times, you don't have the size orchestra that you would have when you made the film originally, because of budgetary reasons. It's expensive to do these kinds of concerts. But hopefully it sounded all right. You'll have to tell me. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm hoping it's out there and sounding good.
Now, I think you're as equally as talented as director as you are a composer, and I just can't wait to see your giant ants. But before then, we've got Werewolf by Night, which brings us to our question from Ivan Sorkin. Can you describe your partnership process with yourself as a director in Werewolf by Night? Did you know as a director which music you needed for this or the scenes that we're filming, or did you find final solutions when you saw the whole edited movie, but as a composer?
I think it was a little bit of both, because I actually wrote the main theme while I was shooting, and I wrote some of the music while I was shooting, so I could bring it on set and I could play it for the actors or play it for the crew, and so everyone would have an idea of what it was we were trying to accomplish that day tonally. It's so, when you play a piece of music for someone, they can just immediately understand the tone you're going for. So that was very helpful to have that. And I had one of my favorite editors that I ever get to work with is Jeff Ford, and we've done 5 movies together. And Jeff Ford edited Werewolf by Night, and it was so wonderful to have him in the same space as me. So I was writing the score as he was editing it, and we were jumping from room to room. And I was like, "Hey, listen to this. Let's put this in there." And I just did that scene. Then he would be like, "Oh, wait, I could adjust it like this. Or if you just give me an extra second here, we can land it." And it was a really fun, creative experience that usually I'm by myself when I'm writing, always. And this was great because I got to have sort of a partner in crime in getting everything just perfect, as opposed to writing everything first, then reviewing, then going back and adjusting. Now it was all happening all concurrently, which was really, really, really fun.
Now, Scott Kiefer walked down the aisle to Married Life. I would love to know how you approached the montage. Any standout challenges, and did you start composing to an animatic or to completed animation?
I wrote to some rough animation and a lot of storyboards. It was all sort of a mix and match of what was going on, because they were in the middle of animating certain aspects of it. But much of it was still in storyboard form. So it was a mix. But, ultimately, again, focusing on the story of what that moment was about and what that moment is about. And I think the reason that so many people find that movie so profound in many ways is because it's openly dealing with a subject matter that we're all going to have to deal with at some point in our life. You're going to lose someone. And how is that going to feel? And in this case, it was losing someone after a lifetime of adventure together. And that was sort of, that's a really emotional thing when you think about it, and if you really put yourself in that shoes and you really start thinking about the people in your life, the people around you. And when that happens, it's kind of easy to get yourself into an emotional spot where you can write the music needed for a scene like that. So again, talking about in the same way with Society of the Snow, just that getting into that truthful, emotional place is really step number one. And it was no different on that film than it was for, say, Society of the Snow.
Now, Esteban Cortez is a huge fan of your Star Trek scores, but I think his bigger question is, what was your particular collaboration on Society with JA? Was it different from Jurassic Park, or did you leave you alone to go off and do your score and come back and here's what it is?
No, he's very trusting, and he allowed me to just go. I would just go, and the thing about the film was I wasn't originally supposed to be scoring that film. It was, I was in the middle of prepping, getting things ready for them, the Giant Ant movie, and then the writer's strike happened. And when that happened, everything just sort of shut down. And so he's like, so now do you have time? Maybe you have time now. And I was like, you know what? Yes, I have time now. Yes. And and obviously I love the film, and I love him very much. He's one of my favorite directors. He's truly an incredible artist and an even kinder person. So, anytime you get to work with people like that, you jump at it if you can. But he generally will just give me the film and just let me go. Let me, sort of do what I think should be done first. And then we can talk about it afterwards. And in many cases, it just stays as it is. Sometimes he'll have an idea which makes it even better. It's that collaboration that I really look forward to whenever I'm working on something. And but I also love the fact that he trusts me and gives me the freedom to go where I feel like I need to go.
Now, Glenn would like to know, do you write your scores in DAW, or are you old school pen and paper?
I haven't written, let's see, the last time I wrote pen and paper, and it was just to work out some themes, was for The Incredibles, because even that was eventually then just written in DP, Digital Performer. It's just so much quicker to use the software than it is to do handwriting and have it all then have to be converted into software, because it eventually will be, because then they have to give it to the copyists who have to give it to the musicians, and there's all of this. So, and nowadays with the way that they seem to endlessly cut the movie until it's almost released, it would be a disaster to have to do everything by hand. So yeah, the Digital Performer, which I write in, is my saving grace for that post-production craziness that happens, because everything is digital now.
Now, Dennis Christos loves your Jurassic and Rogue One scores, and he would love to know about your inspiration for Roar from the Cloverfield closing credits. Where did it come from?
Well, it came from every monster movie I loved growing up, especially Godzilla, obviously. That score is seminal in what it did for monster movies. So I feel like when we did Cloverfield, there was no music in the movie, and I was over at Bad Robot one day when I first found out they were making that film, and I was like, what? I want it. This is great. And JJ looked at me. He's like, yeah, but there's no music in it. I was like, what do you mean? It's a monster movie. How does it not have music? He's like, well, found footage, blah, 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 all this. And I was like, fine. And then about a week later, I was thinking about it. I was like, hey, well, I called him. I said, you're going to need end credit music, right? You're going to need something. Why don't we write the music that would have been in the movie had there been a score for Cloverfield? So that's what we ended up doing, and writing a suite specifically for that. And I had this fun thing that I was playing with before anyway, and it was like and it just all sort of came together very nicely. So it was really fun.
No, I absolutely love that film. Now, Dale would like to know, is it true that after scoring Zootopia, you inherited some of the percussion instruments Emil Richards used in Jerry Goldsmith's Planet of the Apes score? And if so, what instruments where are they hiding? Where were they used?
Yes, I did. He brought them to me, well, actually, while we were recording War for the Planet of the Apes, and he brought me these mixing bowls that he had used. Just mixing bowls that you buy anywhere, like a hardware store or anything. And he said when he was working on Planet of the Apes, the original with Jerry, that he was in a hardware store and he sort of knocked over a bunch of mixing bowls by accident, and he loved the sound of them, and he grabbed them and he bought them, and then he started using different mallets on them to see what they sound like. He would put them all upside down or hold them up and hit this, and he was showing me how he used them on. Of course, we then used them on our Apes films as well, which is kind of fun to have the same percussion kind of link through time back to the original. And Emil Richards was one of the greatest, humans on the planet and one of the greatest, most curious percussionists I've ever seen. Anything that made a sound, he would grab and keep in his collection. So to say I have a few of those things is crazy, because his collection is massive. It's massive. But I feel super lucky to have those, especially from a film that I loved so much growing up. That was sort of seminal in my life in getting me to do what I do. Jerry Goldsmith is a giant. I love him. He was incredible. So yeah.
Wow. Now this is again a good chance for us to go jump into your whole other career that's going on. Now Sam's a big fan of yours, and he wants to know, are you directing any more films in the future? Of course, it's them. And talk about an impressionable image from my youth. It's the giant ant carrying a skull and dumping it down the anthill. Are we going back into the stores of Los Angeles? What are you planning for these big ants this time?
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't say too much about it at the moment, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And I have a story that I'm really, really happy with, that is really fun and exciting and personal. And it feels like, that movie is so great. It again, to point to another favorite of mine as a kid, was Them. And I love what it was saying about the times. I love what it was saying about just humanity and its future, and where are they going to go with it, and how are they going to do it now that we've unleashed this thing called the nuclear age. And it was such a in the way that the best Twilight Zones can make you think about yourself and the world once it's done. That is just that's what I want to shoot for in a film like Them. So I guess all I can say is I'm having a great time. There's some crazy things we've uncovered so far, and I'm just looking forward to sharing that with everyone when it comes out.
Well, I can't wait. Now, obviously, the big preamble for Society of Snow is Lost, and Louis Versalnelli would love to know, do you think that scoring the music for Lost prepared you to score Society of Snow, which is essentially about plane crash survivors?
I don't know. Maybe subliminally. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. They're so different. I mean, other than the fact that it's about a plane crash and survivors, I feel like Society of the Snow was really about telling the story of those who didn't make it. The ones who made it off the mountain have had their story told many times over, and the ones who didn't, usually, they took the background to a lot of this. And so what we wanted to do is bring them forward and make sure that they shine a light on their stories as well. So I always felt as the music in the Society of the Snow as the thing that could give a voice to the voiceless. Whereas in Lost, yes, also survivors, yes, also plane crash, but also absolutely not real. And, dealing with these crazy incidents on the island and all of that, it was much more of a fantasy fun thing than what we had here. But yeah, but Lost, one of my favorite things I ever got to work on. So I do love it.
Now, I think anyone who's gone on the far more pleasurable snowy experience of skiing, you could get snowblind, through just the brightness. How do you musically convey the idea of snow and going snowblind?
I think with this movie, the key was not so much where are we going to put music. It was more about where are we not going to put music. And I think in those moments where there was a lot where we did not have music, that allowed the actual sound effects and the sound designers to do their thing and give you a sense of space, which is usually just covered with music in movies these days. So we made a very conscious decision to, let's continually hand off like a relay race. We will continually hand off. I will do music now. That's what this is about. The next scene is going to be about sound design and sound effects. And they did an incredible job with the sound on this. And I feel like if you walk away feeling like you were actually in the snow from this film, it's because of the sound designers and the work that they did. They told me, they went up to this place, the valley where this crash happened. And they said, when you're standing there, literally the only thing you can hear is your own breath. Everything else is deadly silent. You don't hear anything. So it was an interesting, I think, challenge for them to create that atmosphere. But I do believe it again, as I said, if you come away from this feeling cold and feeling like you just spent a few hours in the snow, it's mostly on them, the sound designers who did this incredible job.
I mean, I think what tremendously impactful sequence and scoring in the film is, obviously the first Alive had probably more elaborate visual effects than this one did. But in this, it's like I've never seen the horror of an avalanche captured without ever seeing the avalanche.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, when it comes right towards the camera like that, it's just, you just see the last few seconds of it or even the last second of it. I mean, again, sound. And then when the next thing you hear is not just a bunch of action music saying, well, we got to get out of here. You're hearing the sounds of them struggling. You're hearing them try to talk to each other. You're hearing them digging through snow. I think the sort of reality of those moments and the way that they were envisioned and then brought to life was so visceral and so just gut-wrenching. And again, that scene in particular, that is a function of the sound effects. The guys did an amazing job on that. And it wasn't until he sees that little bit of light and he's going through the thing that slowly music starts to creep in and his hand comes out and then we have a bit of relief for a moment, of what is. Then they all climb out and they're all, relieved and in the sun after a few days. And it's just like that to me, that's where you put the music. But right before that, nope, just let it be. And there's a moment while they're in there too. Of course, one of their friends passes away and we sort of go down into the ice and we see sort of his body sort of suspended in this place. And there is music there too, but that felt right as well. But really just a combination of working together in an artistic situation with the other people on the crew it's not often, it sounds weird, but you don't often get to do that. You really have to force that to happen and make the time for that to happen. Otherwise, everyone just thinks that it's their job to cover everything, in that way. And then the storytelling quality goes down when that happens. I really do think when you pay attention to the pacing and the spotting of a film, that's one of the most important parts of creating it.
Yeah, great sound work. Now, Demetrius from Greece is a huge fan of your Medal of Honor scores and particularly loves Medal of Honor Frontline. Can you talk a little bit about your ideas on that one?
Oh, yeah. I remember, those scores for me were, I had always wanted to write big action scores. I loved history and I loved learning more as much as I could about World War II. And those films, those films, see, this is how I see them in my head. Those video games in my mind were almost like movies. And I was treating them as movies and I wanted to score them as if they were a film and follow these characters in a way that a big sort of, sweeping film would have done. And it was great because this was how many years ago? I don't even know, 98, 99, whatever it was for Medal of Honor. At a time when most video games were just doing sampled soundtracks. Everything was samples. This, I got live players. I was able to record real orchestras. And the only reason that happened was because Steven Spielberg was producing these games. And in Steven's world, that's how you make music, with live musicians, with people like John Williams, who is the best. So I was so lucky that when he stepped in and was like, okay, well, we have to record these, with an orchestra. Because if he hadn't said that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today, I don't think. And he gave me that opportunity, which allowed me to then just really spread my wings and just go for the scope that I wanted to do for those games. So, and it just felt right to do. And again, sort of just being prepared, being in the right time, in the right place when those opportunities come. But that's sort of the short version of it, but that's how it happened. It was really because of Steven Spielberg saying, no, we got to have live orchestra on these things. And had he not said it, who knows? You'd be talking to somebody else about Society of the Snow.
Yeah, it really helped. But again, I'm of the opinion that the really talented composers will get there no matter what they're using. Now, Silas has a question. He met you at Jack Hayes's place, and he would love to know if you could talk about the importance of orchestration.
Well, orchestration's everything. It's sort of what brings the final sound to the listener. It's one thing in my head to have it bouncing around the way I know it's going to sound, but then to actually get that down on paper is another thing. So Jack Hayes was clearly one of the best orchestrators on the planet, and still is, in my opinion, even though he's no longer with us. But getting to work with him was just a joy, because I felt like I was working with someone who had the knowledge of orchestration from old Hollywood. In many ways, orchestration has changed over the years, because you have, a lot of composers like to do things differently. Some of them like to, record in splits, only do strings, then do brass, and then they split everything up very differently. I'm still very old school. I like doing everyone together whenever I can. COVID was very challenging for that, but in general, I like to just have the orchestra in the room together, because there's a sound you get out of that which is unmistakable. So if doing it that way, orchestration is even more important, because everything has to live together in the same space, and you got to be able to hear the voices the way you want to hear them. Jeff Kricka, who is my current lead orchestrator, is probably one of the best in the world, and he's like the Roadrunner. He's so fast as well. He's just like can zip through anything, and it's just so great. But he's one of the most flexible, talented people I've ever met, and it is important.
Wow. I mean, I think, what's it like for you to be the connective glue of the Marvel universe to a large extent?
It's a blast. I love it. I have many friends over at Marvel. I love working with them on any time something comes up that makes sense. Because when I'm working with them, I really truly feel like I'm working with my friends. Like as a kid, you run next door to your friend's house and bring over all your action figures, and then you set up some big setup in the backyard. That's and that feeling that you get from doing that is the same feeling I get from working on these Marvel projects. I loved so many of these characters when I was a kid. I read comic books. I even had Werewolf by Night comic books. That's why I wanted to do that. But it's just a joy, and it's fun. It's not easy. None of this is, but when you can do it with people that you like, that helps immensely.
Now, Scotty would like to know, what excites you more stylistically? Are you more inclined to write for orchestra, small ensemble, or synth sound design? And what informs the decision to pursue a particular direction for a project?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm inclined to do one way or the other. I like them all. It's really, the decision is made once I get to see the film. And if I look at the film and feel like this needs like, 100-piece orchestra, you want Jurassic World to feel like Jurassic World. Or if it's something like Society of Snow, it felt like being more intimate was the right way to go. And I think that had 50 players. And then there have been other things I've done over time that had 30 players, sometimes less. So it really always is, the scope is really dependent on the story. Story guides everything I do. It's never a thing where I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to use a big orchestra, so I'm just going to use it on this movie. The story dictates every decision made. So that, that way I feel like the music I'm writing is going to fit perfectly into this film, because that's the job. The job isn't to write music I want to hear. The job isn't to write music with a massive orchestra just because I feel like it would be fun. It's like, okay, what's the story? And what music would best serve that story, and not only what music, but what ensemble makeup. So it's not always just a traditional orchestra. It could be any setup you want, anything you want. But again, it's all story driven.
I mean, you've done some really cool little smaller scores. I really like 50/50. I really love Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
And again, you have a whole other kind of dramatic range where Society of Snow really shows off like nothing else. Are there any scores you've done that among the more gigantic ones that you'd like people to know about?
The more gigantic ones. You mean
Or the
any more smaller films? I did one with Tom Bazooka, who directed Monte Carlo called Let Him Go. It was Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. And it's sort of a 60s Western noir kind of a thing. And that was a much smaller score. And that was a really fun one to do. I really enjoyed that a lot. But I feel, it's hard to even remember everything I've written over the years now. When I go back to think about it, I'm like, I don't know, it's a giant blur at this point, my years are usually like someone says, hey, what year was such and such? I'm like, I don't think of the years. I think of like, oh, during Ratatouille, that's when X happened, or I think it's all just kind of messed up my brain, all of it.
Now, this is a nice comment, which kind of leads us to our last question. Now, Jimmy Lehman is a musician and the dad of younger kids. And he just wants to say thanks for all the Pixar work, especially Incredibles, that is helping to keep people engaged in stories. And I think, when you kind of look at a lot of the old school directors, it's like Disney movies that really have given them their love for films and want to be creative. When you look at just all what you've won Oscars for, the Disney films, do you think you're now part of this legacy?
Well, I never thought of it that way until I was wandering around Disney World. Disneyland one time. And all of a sudden I'm walking down Main Street and I hear Up playing on Main Street. And I was like, what? Usually you're just thinking of the job, the music's connected to the film, and then you forget sort of what happens to that music afterwards. And to walk around Disneyland and hear the music from Up playing, I think that was the biggest moment where I was just like, how is this even happening? This is crazy. Because when I think of the music from Disneyland, it's like, all my favorite composers, all the way back into Disney history, including people like the Sherman Brothers. And I go, my music shouldn't be here. This is for them. What is happening? Why is mine here? So, but it's fun to walk around, and now I can walk through the different parks and hear, Spider-Man or Inside Out, or I worked on some Star Wars stuff for them. It's just all Space Mountain. And then even over at Universal, to get on that ride and hear the Jurassic World music. It's kind of fun, but it is a little shocking, actually.
Well, I don't know if Society of Snow is ever going to be a Pixar film.
But no, and I doubt a little, and hopefully will never become like an attraction at Universal or something.
I don't even want to imagine. Maybe Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, congratulations to you and Jay. Just an extraordinary film and score. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. Society of Snow is now on Netflix with Michael's score, available digitally on Netflix Music, and it's on CD from Cord Cut Records. And I want to give a special thanks to Maria Giacchino, Jenna Covarrubias, Jose Benitez, our show's executive producer, Mark Northam, graphic designer, Mark Banning, and our producer, Dale Turner. And I'll be seeing you on the next Film Music Live. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. Thank you so much.